Welcome. I'm Karen Lips, president of the Network of Enlightened Women. We've deemed 2021 the year of the conservative woman. And each month we are highlighting a different conservative woman of the month. I'm excited this month to be featuring Heidi Ganahl, one of Colorado's most well-known entrepreneurs and leaders. When faced with extraordinary adversity, Heidi responded by turning her lifelong passion for dogs into Camp Bow Wow. Her success with Camp Bow Wow led to her being named one of Fortune's 10 most promising women entrepreneurs in 2014 and among the top women entrepreneurs in the country by Parade magazine. In 2014, she sold Camp Bow Wow to turn her attention to philanthropy, politics, and other ventures. In 2016, she was elected as a University of Colorado regent. Heidi also founded the Fight Back Foundation to tackle the most pressing issues facing our kids. And she's launched SheFactor to teach 20-somethings, in particular 20-something women, how to create a life they truly love. And she's a mom of 4 kids. Heidi, thank you for joining us today. We're excited to feature you during November Entrepreneurship Month, and we're excited to share your story.
Thanks so much, Karen, for having me. You do such a great job at inspiring young women around our country. So I'm very honored to be here.
Oh, well, thank you, Heidi. I'd love to start by giving you the chance to share your story, the adversity you've faced, how you've turned that around and started so many successful ventures. Could you start with your story of how you started Camp Bow Wow?
Sure. Well, it starts with my own 2 furry pups named Mick and Winnie, and this was back in the mid '90s. And I was married. We could not find a good place for our dogs, and thought, wow, this isn't that difficult. Why can't anybody create a place that we love taking our dogs to instead of a place that we feel guilty about doing that? So we came up with the idea for Camp Bow Wow. We sketched it out on the back of a napkin and modeled it after a doggy daycare that was next door to my dad's business, one of the first in the Western United States, but just jazzed it up a lot and wrote the business plan, started looking around for a place, but we didn't have any resources. We were both had lots of student loan debt and didn't come from a lot of money, but had a lot of passion and got told over and over again by landlords that we were crazy. There's no way they would let us put, 100 dogs in their building and do this concept. But we thought we were very visionary and dreamers and thought that we could make it happen. And shortly after we wrote the business plan, my husband was killed in a small plane crash. And so my life changed pretty dramatically at that point. And I put the business plan up on a shelf and managed to make have lots of twists and turns in my journey after that. Until about 6 years later, when my little brother came to me and said, you're really lost. You haven't found your way back yet. Why don't we start Camp Bow Wow and see if we can't make that happen? So we launched it in December of 2000 and ended up growing it to about $100 million brand and 200 franchises around the country and sold it in 2014 and then went on to do other things.
Wow, what a story. And I'm sure you've learned some great lessons from that. And I know now you've started other ventures, some in the private sector, some in nonprofit sector. Could you talk about what lessons translate across different sectors that you've learned in being an entrepreneur?
Oh boy, there's a lot. I could write a whole book about this.
I think you should, Heidi.
I think it really goes to the golden rule and kind of some basic blocking and tackling in life, like treat others as you'd want to be treated. I love the 4 agreements, that book, and it talks about your word is impeccable and just really being a good person, a good business owner, treating your employees well, listening to your customers. And, entrepreneurship is, at the end of the day, it's about solving problems and doing so in a way that honors your values, your integrity, and, kind of how you roll with life. So I think there's so many lessons tied up in starting a business, but it's really the day-to-day, how you treat people and how you interact with your customers that get you across the finish line.
I love so much about what you say, but in particular for our college students, that lesson of solving a problem, right? I imagine you didn't set out just to start a business to start a business, you had a specific need, and realized and identified there was a problem that wasn't being solved. And that's something we're often encouraging our students is they don't need to wait until they're out of college to solve problems and be leaders. Could you talk about sort of that moment of when you really decided with your brother to do something about it, and how scary was it to take that big leap?
Well, I think back to that moment, and it wasn't scary so much as I was just so curious to see if it was going to work. And, I was bootstrapping it for the most part. So I wasn't necessarily worried about the money perspective from wasting money or like, risking the money. I was more worried about, would I do it right? Could I pull this off? Like, what challenges am I going to face? It's more the unknown, right? When you start a business, and you can be very sure of yourself and sure of your vision for your brand, but at the end of the day, life happens and stuff happens, and you never know exactly how it's going to turn out. But it exceeded my wildest dreams, so it was a great experience for me.
So, what advice would you have for a young woman who has an idea and is thinking about starting a business?
Go for it. I think I encourage every young person to start their own business at some point along the way to see if they have that entrepreneur bug. Because if you do, you're not going to be happy working in corporate America. You should just figure it out or work for a very entrepreneurial company or a startup. But it's a lot of fun. It's the hardest work you'll ever do. It's like playing in a video game. You never know what's going to come at you, but that's part of the joy in doing it, is figuring out how to navigate that and build a brand that you've poured your whole heart and soul into, and a vision for the people around you.
And Heidi, how has starting a business influenced your politics and your view of the role of government?
Well, one of the reasons I got involved in politics was because I started to recognize how much the government played in our ability to grow the business, whether it was zoning for our new facilities or telling us how many people we had to have in the dog play yard areas, and really messing with our profitability.
So, do they regulate? I know they'll try to like regulate how many kids can be in a classroom with a teacher, right? Are there policies on how many dogs can be, like the ratio with somebody watching the dogs?
Yes, there is, believe it or not. In
Really?
Colorado, not every state does this, but we had a ratio of 1 to 25 when before the state stepped in. And then the Department of Agriculture, which is it's an unelected bureaucrat. It's not someone who's elected to oversee this, comes in and says, you've got to do 1 to 15. And I'm like, well, wow, we do a pretty good job around the country of this. And where are you getting your data that this is a better number? They really didn't have any answers. They just thought it was better, to make it more aligned with what the rules were for childcare. So we went back and forth for a couple of years, and I never was able to get that changed. And it really reduced the profitability of our franchises there. And it didn't change our safety record at all. We had a great safety record. And it occurred to me that, people are going to vote with their dollar. If you're not doing a good job of taking care of their precious animals, they're not going to bring their dogs there. So it's in our own best interest to take very good care of the pups, and which we did.
So, is it fair to say that you weren't that interested in politics, and then your kind of run-in or experience with regulation really got you interested in politics?
I would say that's accurate. And I think that the recognition that I had over the years of being so blessed to live in this country and be able to live the American dream, and wanting to protect that for future generations, is really what got me to put my hand up and run in 2016 for Regent.
Well, and I think that's so fascinating that you are one of the statewide elected officials in Colorado. If I'm correct, I believe you're the last Republican statewide elected official in Colorado.
I am. That's a lonely place to be, and I don't want it to be that way. So we're going to try and change that the next election cycle. But yeah, it's our state has turned quite blue, and I think that we can take it back. Hopefully, we can do that sooner than later, before a lot more damage is done. But I'm working with a group of very passionate people our goal is to do just that.
So tell us a little bit about what made you decide to throw your hat in the ring and run for office.
Well, I think my worlds kind of collided. So I was involved with an organization that helped small businesses advocate or, do lobbying in DC and helped us find our voice and speak up for things that were important to keeping our business healthy. But then I also was very involved at University of Colorado. I was on the business school board and then the CU Foundation board, and was asked to consider running for regent. I was like, I don't know what a regent does at first. And after I learned more about it, it really was a good fit for me. And then finally, I had just sold my company and I was really wanting to pay it forward and do something to give back. And I thought this was a great combination of my skills and talents to take this on. And in Colorado, you have to run for political office to be a regent. And so it was quite different than in a lot of other states, but it worked out well for me.
Well, and what's been your biggest surprise? I imagine, serving on the Board of Regents, there's lots of issues that campuses deal with, from, tuition, raising costs, to free speech issues. Talk about what have been some of the biggest surprises that you faced in that role?
One of the biggest surprises for me is how quickly things have changed on the free speech front and academic freedom, and how frightening it is to be a conservative student at some of these campuses these days. So kudos to the young women that are part of your organization that are brave enough to stand tall and do that. I find that the students are often the tougher bullies, or more of a bully than the teachers, like you hear in the news. So that's been disheartening. And I've had to really, have the back of a lot of students who had complaints or wanted to, speak up about this. Um, the other thing is really how political higher education is. It's shocking to me how every decision we make is made into a political decision. And I don't
Really?
think, yeah, I don't think it has to be. Even, tuition. I worked really hard to try to get tuition rebates during COVID because everybody was online. And I thought that was the right thing to do. And it got very political and went down party lines on who wanted to do that and who didn't. So I listened to the students, and the students were telling me, and the families were telling me loud and clear that they did not feel it was appropriate that they pay full price tuition and fees when they were doing their classes from home or their dorm rooms online. And I agreed with them. And so I helped them get organized and put together a petition. And they asked me if I would put forward a resolution to do just that, to lower tuition or give them a rebate. And it did not get much traction. The rest of the regions, or the majority of the regions, decided that wasn't a good idea and turned it down. So that was a bit shocking to me.
Well, let's turn to the free speech issue, because that's something our students, face a lot on campus. And I did notice that University of Colorado has adopted the Chicago principles, so that seems like a good sign there. But it seems like it's not just the faculty and the administrators, but now it's also the students who seem to be censoring and canceling as well. How can you fight back against that and instill in the next generation of college students how important free speech is?
Well, at CU, we like to say we want to teach the students how to think, not what to think. And I think if everyone has that attitude, from faculty to administration to fellow students, then you're in a good place, right? But it's just been a very, uh, difficult year and a half on this issue. And we've seen lots of, social unrest and everything happening with COVID, and really a cancel culture developing. And it takes a lot of gumption for a young person, for someone who's 19 or 20, to stand up to the social media mob, if you want to call it that, or their fellow students if they disagree. And we're asking a lot of those students to do that and to file complaints and really go through the process so that we can make sure that doesn't happen. So I think at the end of the day, it's more an issue that they stay quiet. They typically just don't talk about it and let it fly under the radar, and that doesn't help solve the problem. So I encourage students that do have issues, and faculty members, to speak out, to file a complaint through at our school. It's the OIAC, the Office of Institutional, I can't remember the acronym, but um, really to do what they can to call it out when it happens.
Well, I think there's troubling implications for our politics in years to come if students are learning that it's okay to, if basically students are learning to censor on college campuses. That seems very problematic for, the future senators and House members. I mean, how are they going to work together if during their years in higher education, they were taught to basically censor each other and not talk to each other? And then the conservative students are taught just to remain silent. I mean, that seems not only a problem now on campus, but in years to come for our country.
Well, I think we're seeing it play out right now in the divisiveness in Washington, D.C., and in many of our state capitals. So I think it's here, and I think we've got to be very dedicated to shifting this narrative. I think there's some good groups working on that. At CU, I have my Free to Be Coalition, which we try and host a debate every semester on both sides of the issue to model good debate tactics and conversation for students. But the old debate clubs have gone away on most campuses, which is very unfortunate. I think there is a group called Braver Angels that's trying to bring that back up on college campuses and doing a pretty good job of it. But it's going to take all of us working together to listen to the other side, to figure out ways to collaborate and communicate, and to get things done effectively when, sometimes we don't want to play with the other side.
Yeah, it's hard. And I'd say as conservatives, often when our conservative women are shut down on campus, that really becomes challenging to recruit, to get other people to speak up. It's just not an atmosphere where intellectual diversity, I would say, is spreading when
Right.
you'd really want that on college campuses. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like being on the board of regents as a conservative? What advice would you have for conservative young women who feel like they're getting shouted down or silenced all the time?
Hold your head high, really learn how to make your arguments in a productive way, a positive, productive way. And then don't be afraid to um, discuss, right? And it's going to be challenging, it's going to be hard. Keep your calm and trust that you're going to know how to articulate your position when it's time. And also stick up for your fellow students and fellow faculty members. You guys have to have each other's backs, and it's important that your administrators and trustees do as well. So find ones that you think would be supportive and get to be friends with them, take them to coffee and ask for their help.
What unique challenges do you think conservative women face on campus and in society, just being conservative women?
Oh boy, I think it's just a really complicated time right now with social media and the ability to cancel someone or have a group of people cancel somebody, whether live or online. And so I think really getting strong in your faith, in your values, knowing how to articulate, knowing how to defend your positions in a positive, helpful way, and really learning to persuade people why you believe what you do and why you think it's a better solution to take a free market perspective as an example to a problem. But it's really on us to do the work, to be disciplined, and to present our arguments in a good way that persuades other people. And so once we can do that better, I think you'll start to see things shift. And once we can have each other's back and collaborate and build community, which you're doing, which is fantastic, then we'll start to see some shifts, I think.
Well, you talk about that persuasion, Heidi. Could you talk a little bit more about how you prepare for those conversations with someone on the other side and how you win over people to conservative ideas?
I think Arthur Brooks' book, Conservative Heart, is one of the best books on this topic. And it really discusses why we advocate for the solutions that we do. And I think looking at it from the perspective of America as the land of opportunity, and that we all, what we want is for everyone to have opportunity, right? To live life the way they want to pursue happiness. Um, to get back to reminding people that that's what we love about this country. That's what we love about the founding principles is that, you know, I don't think anybody really recognized what a level playing field means when we're talking about communism, Marxism, socialism, and what that does to incentives and incentivizing young people to go out and try and start a business or to really knock it out of the park, get a PhD or a master's and invest in their future. I think it takes away those incentives, and that's not fun. And that's not what was intended when the founding fathers built this great country.
Well, Heidi, I want to turn to your latest venture, a podcast. Could you tell us a little bit about that? And also, how do you decide which idea to pursue next? Because I would imagine that you've got lots of ideas of different projects to take on.
I do. I mean, I'm a creator by nature and I love solving problems. And so I dabble in lots of different projects and companies and brands all at the same time, which is a little confusing for some people. But the common thread is really preserving the American dream and opportunity. And one of the things that I've noticed is that people can come together and get past their divisiveness when you hear their stories. And so the idea for Heidi's Colorful Colorado came about from my love of my state and my desire to get people talking again and really seeing each other as human beings and not just somebody behind a screen. And we're going to visit all 64 counties in Colorado and interview people who have great stories and about their connection to the state of Colorado. And we've done about 20 of them so far. It's been fantastic. And it's just very heartwarming to hear people tell their stories and talk about how much they love this state. And that's a common thread we can all build on and get past our divisiveness around, is our love of Colorado. And it's called Heidi's Colorful Colorado. If you guys have driven into Colorado, you've seen the Welcome to Colorful Colorado sign. It's a play off of that. But we have a video version on YouTube. We have the regular podcast on Spotify and all the typical channels. And then a weekly newsletter that comes out every Thursday that you can sign up for at HeidiGanahl.com.
Thanks for sharing that. We'll make sure to share the links as well. So I want to turn now to leadership. As our featured conservative woman of the month, could you talk a little bit about what leadership skills do you think are really important for young women to be developing now?
I think the most important thing you can do is surround yourself with great people who have done what you aspire to do. In SheFactor, we call it, my company with my daughter, we call it the SEAL Team 6, after Harris Faulkner actually came up with that term. And it's called an accountability team, and really picking some people who will hold you to your word. And if you are trying to accomplish a big goal, will help you get there and have your back and introduce you to people and help you brainstorm. So it's a SEAL Team 6. It's surrounding yourself with great people that can help you on your journey. The other thing I would suggest is listening. Just listen to lots of great leaders, whether it's through podcasts or Audible books, or if you like to read books, and pay attention to how they talk, what they talk about. I encourage a lot of people to go sign up for Masterclass. I think it's a great platform, and it's a way to listen to some incredible leaders tell their stories and talk about their journey to building their companies.
Well, what are some of your favorite podcasts you listen to?
Oh goodness, I am I listen to a smorgasbord, so I don't necessarily stick with one or two. I'm all over the board. I love listening to podcasts about entrepreneurs, like How'd You Build It. I love listening to political podcasts. Obviously, there's tons there. I really like, what's his name? Dave Rubin's. Dave Rubin's is really good. And I like Megyn Kelly's. I listen to Megyn Kelly's quite a bit. So I also listen to podcasts about being a mom. And then I listen to my church podcasts. So lots all across the board.
Well, one of our earlier conservative women of the month was Laura Cox Kaplan from the
I love Laura.
podcast. So
I love hers too. She said, that's a great podcast. I was actually on that about 2 years ago, and she's so lovely. She's great.
That's great. So I figured, we've got podcasts represented here, so that's great. So I'd love to hear more about any advice you'd give to young women about how to be leaders now, in their communities, on their campuses. How do they take on a leadership role?
Well, I think it starts with finding your passion. And once you find something you're really passionate about, whether it's politics or business or, church, whatever it is, then put your hand up and say yes. Say, I want to help. I want to lead. I want to do something. How can I help? And the opportunities will come to you. It's kind of like that kids movie or that kids show where they say yes to everything. Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I certainly would get used to saying yes and going to meetings that make you feel uncomfortable or stretching your boundaries a little bit, And then reach out to people that you admire that are leaders. Ask them to go to coffee, ask them to hop on a Zoom. Don't be shy, really stretch yourself that way, and I think you'll have some amazing conversations and the opportunities will likely come.
Thank you, Heidi, so much for being our Conservative Woman of the Month this month. We're delighted to feature you and showcase your work and share your story with our students.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so honored and I love the work you guys are doing. Keep it up. It's so badly needed.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you.